Hello, everyone. Welcome back to English in Fluency. I'm Alex, your host for today. Let me start with a question for you to think about. Have you ever been in a situation where the more you tried to explain yourself, the worse the misunderstanding became? You use more and more words, trying to build a bridge to the other person, but it feels like every word you add is just another stone in a wall growing between you. In our modern lives, we are taught that clarity comes from explanation, that connection comes from communication, and that success comes from speaking up. We live in a world that celebrates the quick answer, the confident opinion, and the person who can command a room with their voice. But what if the opposite were true? What if real power, real clarity, and real connection are not found in the noise we make, but in the silence we choose to create? It's a counterintuitive idea, isn't it? We see silence as empty, awkward, a sign of weakness or uncertainty. But the truth is, silence is one of the most powerful and misunderstood tools we possess. It is not an absence of communication. It is a different, more profound form of it. Silence is a space where thoughts can be gathered, emotions can settle, and true listening can finally begin. It is a strategic tool that can completely change the dynamic in your favor, whether you are in a difficult negotiation, a sensitive conversation, or even just trying to make a big decision about your own life. I vividly remember a lesson I learned from my grandfather, a man of very few words. When I was younger, I was full of nervous energy, always talking, always explaining. One day, I was telling him about a problem I had with a friend, going on and on about who said what and why it was unfair. My mind was like a storm. After I finally ran out of breath, my grandfather didn't offer any advice. He simply looked at me, nodded slowly, and remained quiet. The silence felt uncomfortable at first, a gaping void where I expected guidance to be. I fidgeted, waiting for him to speak, but he just continued to offer his calm, quiet presence. Then something amazing happened. In that quiet space he created, a space free from judgment or interruption, I started to hear my own thoughts more clearly. I replayed the argument in my head, and without the pressure of defending my position to him, I began to see the situation from my friend's perspective for the first time. The solution to my own problem emerged not from his words, but from the stillness he offered me. He taught me that day that you don't always help people by talking. Sometimes you help them by giving them the silence they need to hear themselves. That is the journey we are going on together today. We are going to explore the art of intentional silence. We will look at stories and real-life examples that reveal how a simple, deliberate pause can be more persuasive than 1,000 words. We will discuss how silence can help you build deeper, more trusting relationships, and how it can become your sanctuary for finding clarity amidst the chaos of life. We will also venture into the unique challenges of our modern world, exploring how silence can be our greatest defense against the constant noise of the digital age. And crucially, for our path here together, we will discover how embracing silence can be the secret key to unlocking a new level of confidence and fluency in your English speaking. This is about more than just communication skills. It's about a new way of being. So I invite you now to find a quiet space, to let your shoulders relax, and to join me as we uncover the incredible, transformative power of silence. Let us begin our exploration in the area of our lives where we use words the most. Our daily conversations and our relationships with the people who matter to us. We often believe that a good relationship is one where there is constant communication, where everything is talked about and nothing is left unsaid. While open communication is certainly important, we often misunderstand what that truly means. We mistake talking for connecting. We think that filling every moment with words will bring us closer, but sometimes it does the exact opposite. True connection often grows in the quiet spaces we leave for each other. Think about the feeling of being truly listened to. It's a rare and beautiful experience. It's the feeling of someone giving you their full, undivided attention, not just to the words you are saying, but to the meaning and emotion behind them. But active, deep listening is impossible if we are constantly waiting for our turn to speak, if our mind is busy formulating a reply while the other person is still talking. Silence is the very foundation of listening. When you offer someone your quiet, focused attention, you are giving them a profound gift. You are communicating, without a single word, that they are important, that their thoughts and feelings are valid, and that you are there for them completely. This kind of silent presence can be more healing and more supportive than any advice you could ever give. Let me share a story with you about a woman named Isabel, a team leader at a software company. Isabel was a kind and effective manager, but she had one major weakness. She was deeply uncomfortable with confrontation and difficult conversations. She had a very talented but very shy junior designer on her team named Daniel. Daniel's work was brilliant, full of creativity and insight, but recently he had been struggling to meet his deadlines, which was causing delays for the entire team. Isabel knew she had to talk to him about it, and her first attempt was a complete disaster. She called him into her glass-walled office, and the moment he sat down, her own anxiety took over. She felt a desperate need to soften the blow, to get the difficult part over with as quickly as possible. So, she started talking immediately and didn't stop. Her words tumbled out in a rushed, nervous stream. She said things like, "Daniel, hi, thanks for coming in. So, we need to talk about your performance. Now don't worry, you're so talented. We all see that. But I've just noticed you're falling behind a little on the project timelines, and it's starting to affect the whole team's schedule. So we really need you to manage your time better, okay? What's going on? Is the work too much?" She poured out all her concerns in a single, breathless monologue. Daniel just sat there, his shoulders hunched, looking overwhelmed and cornered. He mumbled a few apologies about being a bit disorganized and promised to try harder. He quickly left the office, leaving Isabel feeling that the conversation had been a failure. It didn't solve anything. It only seemed to make Daniel more withdrawn and anxious for the rest of the week. She had spoken at him, not with him. Isabel felt terrible. She replayed the conversation in her mind and realized her approach was all wrong. Her anxiety had filled the room, leaving no space for Daniel to be honest. A week later, she decided to try again, but this time she had a completely different strategy, one that felt unnatural and scary to her. Silence. She invited Daniel for a walk to a nearby park during their lunch break. When they found a quiet bench to sit on, Isabel resisted every urge to fill the silence. For the first minute, she said nothing at all. She just looked at the trees and took a few calm, centering breaths. The silence was not tense or accusatory. It was gentle, open, and inviting. Finally, She turned to Daniel and said one simple, open-ended sentence. "I get the sense that you might be feeling a lot of pressure lately." And then she did the hardest part. She fell silent again. She just waited, holding his gaze with a look of patient, kind curiosity. This time, the silence worked like magic. It gave Daniel the space he needed, free from the pressure of an immediate demand or accusation. He didn't have to be defensive. After a long moment, a moment in which Isabel had to fight her own urge to speak, he took a deep breath and started to talk. His voice was quiet at first. He explained that his mother had been ill for the past few months, and that he was the primary caregiver for her in the evenings after work. He was cooking, cleaning, and providing emotional support. He was exhausted, emotionally drained, and terrified of losing his job, and it was making it impossible for him to focus on his work. He confessed that he had been too ashamed and afraid to tell anyone, worried they would think he was making excuses. Isabel listened quietly, her whole being focused on him, nodding with empathy, not interrupting him once. Her silence created a sanctuary of trust, a safe harbor where his vulnerability was welcome. By the end of the conversation, they had worked out a temporary solution for a more flexible work schedule that would allow him to support his mother without falling behind. The problem was resolved, and, more importantly, the bond of trust and respect between them was stronger than ever. A month later, Daniel's mother was recovering, and he was back to being the brilliant, productive designer he had always been, now with a deep sense of loyalty to Isabel, the manager who had listened to him. Isabel's 2 attempts show the stark difference between communication as noise and communication as space. Her words of concern, when rushed and anxious, built a wall, but her silence, offered with empathy, opened a door. This is a lesson we can all apply. When you need to have a difficult or sensitive conversation with someone, resist the urge to fill the space with your own words. Start with a simple, gentle opening, and then offer the gift of your silence. Give the other person the room to find their own words, to share their own truth. You will often find that the most important information emerges not when you are asking questions, but when you are patiently waiting for the answers. This principle also applies to our most intimate relationships. Think about a time you had a misunderstanding with a loved one. The natural instinct is often to talk it out immediately, to explain your side of the story, to defend your actions. We believe that more words will lead to more understanding. But when emotions are high, words often become weapons. They can be used to blame, to hurt, and to create even greater distance. Consider the story of a mother named Maria and her teenage son, Leo. Leo had always been a cheerful and open child, but over the past year, he had become quiet and distant, spending most of his time in his room with the door closed. Maria was worried sick. Her mind created all sorts of terrible scenarios. Every day, she would try to breach the wall he had built around himself, bombarding him with questions she thought were loving. How was school today? What's wrong? Why won't you talk to me? Are your friends being nice to you? Are you in some kind of trouble? Her questions were born from a deep place of love and concern. But to Leo, who was navigating the complex inner world of being a teenager, they felt like an aggressive interrogation. The more she pushed with her words, the more he pulled away into a resentful silence. One evening, after another failed attempt at conversation, Maria sat in her kitchen feeling heartbroken and helpless. She remembered the advice of a friend who had told her, "Sometimes they don't need you to fix it. They just need you to be there." That night, she decided to try something completely different, something that went against every one of her maternal instincts. She knocked gently on Leo's door, and, instead of asking a question, she just said, "Can I come in for a minute?" He shrugged, not looking up from his phone. She came in and sat on the edge of his bed. She didn't look at her phone. She didn't try to start a conversation. She didn't ask him to get off his phone. She just sat there with him, in shared silence. For 5 long, excruciating minutes for her, they said nothing. The only sounds were the faint hum of his computer and the distant traffic outside. Maria had to fight every impulse to speak, to ask, to pry. She just focused on her breathing and on sending him silent waves of love. Then, without any prompting, Leo put his phone down. He let out a heavy sigh and said, his voice barely a whisper, "I messed up a friendship." And slowly, hesitantly, he started to tell her about a serious argument he had with his best friend, an argument that had left him feeling ashamed and isolated. Maria's silence had communicated something that her frantic questions never could. It communicated unconditional presence. It said, "I am here with you, no matter what. You don't have to perform for me. You don't have to have the right answers. I am just here, and I am not going anywhere." By quieting her own anxiety and her need for an immediate solution, she created the emotional safety that allowed her son to become vulnerable. So, I invite you to conduct a small experiment in your own life. Choose one important relationship where you feel there might be some distance. The next time you are with that person, make a conscious effort to talk less and listen more. Create pockets of silence in your conversation. When they are speaking, give them your full, undivided attention. Don't think about your reply. Just absorb their words. When they finish speaking, instead of jumping in immediately, take a single, slow breath. See what happens in that space. You might be astonished to find that this simple shift from speaking to stillness can begin to heal misunderstandings, build trust, and bring a new depth of connection to your relationships. Silence, in this context, is not an absence of love. It is one of its most powerful expressions. Having seen how silence can deepen our personal connections, let's now shift our focus to more formal settings, where persuasion and negotiation are key. In these high-stakes environments, from a business deal to a salary discussion, we tend to believe that the most articulate and verbally aggressive person will come out on top. We prepare our arguments, we rehearse our speeches, and we strategize about how to out-talk the other side. But what if the most powerful move you could make is no move at all? What if your greatest source of leverage is your ability to remain silent when everyone else expects you to speak? The psychology behind this is fascinating. In any negotiation, there is an underlying current of tension. Each party wants to get the best possible outcome for themselves. When you introduce a deliberate, extended pause into the conversation, you amplify that tension. Most people are not trained to handle this discomfort. Our brains are wired to interpret a sudden, unexpected silence in a social context as a potential problem, a sign of rejection or disapproval. This triggers a mild stress response. To relieve their own anxiety, they often feel a powerful compulsion to speak, to fill the silence. And in doing so, they frequently give up valuable ground. They might sweeten their offer, reveal a weakness, or provide extra information that you can then use to your advantage. Let's imagine a small business owner named Samir. Samir runs a graphic design agency, a passion project he built from the ground up. He is in a pivotal meeting with a potential new client, a senior manager from a large corporation named Ms. Chen. Securing this contract would not only be financially significant, it would be a huge validation of his work and would allow him to hire another designer. After Samir presents his detailed and passionate proposal, Ms. Chen, a formidable and experienced executive, looks it over and says in a cool, businesslike tone, "This looks very good, Samir. Your team is clearly talented. Our budget for this project is $10,000. Samir's heart sinks. His detailed quote, based on the immense amount of work required, was for $15,000. $10,000 would barely cover his costs. The old Samir would have immediately started to panic and talk. His mind would be racing, and his words would reflect that desperation. He might have said, "Oh, 10,000 is a bit low, Ms. Chen. We were really thinking more in the $15,000 range because of the complexity of the work and the hours for my team." He would have sounded defensive, weak, and a little desperate. But the new Samir, who has been studying the art of negotiation, decides to try a different tactic. He hears the offer of $10,000. He takes a slow, almost imperceptible breath to calm his racing heart. He looks Ms. Chen directly in the eye with a calm and neutral expression, nods slowly as if he is deep in thought, and says absolutely nothing. The silence hangs in the air. 5 seconds pass. It feels like a minute. 10 seconds pass. To Samir, it feels like an hour. He has to fight every screaming impulse in his body to speak, to justify his price, to fill the void. He just holds her gaze calmly. Ms. Chen, a woman used to being in control, starts to feel a flicker of uncertainty. She was expecting a counteroffer, a debate. Samir's silence is a blank canvas, and she starts to paint her own anxieties onto it. She thinks, "Did I offend him? Maybe 10,000 is a ridiculously low offer for work of this quality. His portfolio is much more impressive than the other agencies we've seen. We really want to work with his team." The pressure of the silence becomes too much for her to bear. Finally, it is she who breaks. She clears her throat and says, "Of course, that 10,000 is just a starting point for discussion. For a partner of your caliber, we could certainly adjust the budget to 12,000, maybe even 13, especially if you can guarantee a quick turnaround." Samir still doesn't speak immediately. He lets her improved offer hang in the air for another moment, letting it solidify. Then he allows a small, thoughtful smile and says, 13,000 would make it possible for me to dedicate my senior designer to the project full-time. I believe we can do great work together." In the space of less than a minute, without a single word of argument, Samir had increased his earnings by 30% and gained the respect of his new client. His silence was not passive, it was an active strategy. It communicated confidence, it implied that he had other options, and it subtly pressured Ms. Chen to negotiate against herself. He didn't have to be aggressive or demanding, he just had to be more comfortable with the silence than she was. This technique, often called the Great Pause, is one of the most effective tools in any negotiator's toolkit. It requires emotional control and a bit of courage, because you have to be willing to sit with the discomfort. The key is your nonverbal behavior during the pause. You shouldn't look angry, impatient, or upset. Your posture should be relaxed but attentive. Your facial expression should be thoughtful, as if you are genuinely considering their offer with great care. This makes the silence feel respectful, not hostile. It's a powerful way to signal that you are not in a hurry, and that you are not desperate for a deal. You can begin to build your silence muscle in everyday, low-stakes situations. The next time you are at a shop returning an item, and the clerk explains the store's policy, instead of immediately agreeing or arguing, just pause for a few seconds and nod thoughtfully before you respond. Notice how that brief moment of quiet can subtly shift the dynamic and make the clerk more attentive and willing to help. Or, if you are discussing plans with a group of friends and someone makes a suggestion, hold back from giving your opinion right away. Let a moment of silence pass. You might find that someone else speaks up and offers a better idea, or that the group naturally moves towards a consensus without you having to force it. This same principle of strategic silence is a hallmark of effective leadership. A leader who is always talking, always giving orders, and always needing to be the center of attention can create a culture of dependency. Team members learn to wait for instructions rather than thinking for themselves. In contrast, a leader who is skilled in using silence can empower their team and foster a culture of innovation. Imagine a brainstorming meeting led by a manager named Rebecca. She presents a complex problem to her team and asks for their ideas. After she poses the question, instead of immediately sharing her own thoughts or calling on someone, she leans back, makes eye contact with the group, and becomes quiet. She creates an open, expectant space for her team to think. At first, there might be a few seconds of silence, as people are often hesitant to be the first to speak. A less confident leader might get nervous and jump in to fill this silence with their own ideas, effectively shutting down the brainstorming process. But Rebecca remains patient. Her comfortable silence is a nonverbal cue that says, "I trust you. I value your ideas. I am waiting to hear what you have to say." Eventually, one person offers a tentative idea, then another. The silence has given them permission to think without pressure, and it has signaled that their contributions are genuinely wanted. This leader understands that her role is not to have all the answers, but to create an environment where the best answers can emerge from the collective intelligence of her team. So, whether you are negotiating a contract, trying to persuade a colleague, or leading a team, I encourage you to rethink your relationship with silence. Stop seeing it as a void, and start seeing it as a space of opportunity. It is a space where you can let the other person do the work, where you can demonstrate confidence without arrogance, and where you can allow better ideas to come to the surface. It is a subtle power, but its effects can be dramatic. The next time you are in a situation that requires persuasion, try speaking less and pausing more. Let your silence speak for you. You may be amazed at what it has to say. So far, we have explored the profound impact of silence on our external world, in our relationships, and our negotiations. Now, it is time to turn our journey inward, to explore what is perhaps the most challenging and most rewarding frontier of all: the silence within our own minds. Our inner world is rarely quiet. It is a bustling, chaotic place, filled with a constant stream of thoughts. a never-ending to-do list, echoes of past conversations, and anxieties about the future. This internal noise, this mental chatter, is so constant that most of us don't even notice it anymore. It has become the background music of our lives. But this incessant noise comes at a high cost. It depletes our energy, clouds our judgment, and disconnects us from our own deepest truths. Cultivating inner silence, therefore, is not just a spiritual practice. It is a fundamental act of self-care and a prerequisite for living a clear, intentional, and joyful life. To understand this better, let's use an analogy. Imagine your mind is a garden. Every day, countless thoughts, like seeds, are blown into this garden by the winds of your experiences. Some of these seeds grow into beautiful flowers, ideas of creativity, love, and joy. But many others grow into weeds, thoughts of worry, self-doubt, fear, and resentment. If you never tend to your garden, the weeds will quickly take over. They will wrap their roots around the flowers, blocking their access to sunlight and water. They will deplete the soil of its nutrients and turn your once beautiful garden into a tangled, overgrown mess. In this state, it becomes impossible to think clearly or feel peaceful. Cultivating inner silence is the act of mindfully tending to this garden. It's not about forcefully preventing any weeds from growing. That's impossible. It's about gently and patiently clearing them away, creating space for the flowers to bloom. Let me share the story of a musician named Chloe. Chloe was a gifted pianist, known for her passionate and emotive performances, but she had reached a point in her career where she felt completely stuck. She was suffering from a severe case of creative block. Every time she sat down at her grand piano, a place that once felt like a sanctuary, her mind would be flooded with a cacophony of critical, anxious thoughts. This isn't good enough. You've lost your talent. Everyone is better than you are. The piece you wrote last year was a fluke. You'll never write another beautiful piece of music. The noise in her head was deafening. The joy she once felt from the simple act of playing music had been replaced by a gnawing anxiety and a profound sense of dread. The more she tried to force a new melody to come, the more her mind screamed at her that she was a failure. Frustrated and on the verge of giving up, Chloe's wise old piano teacher gave her some unusual advice. He didn't suggest a new practice technique or a book on music theory. He said, "Chloe, for the next week, I want you to go to the sea. And I want you to leave your keyboard, your phone, and your music at home. Do not try to create anything. Just go and sit by the water. And listen." Chloe was skeptical. How could doing nothing possibly help her create something? It felt like a waste of precious time. But, trusting her teacher's wisdom, she rented a small, rustic cottage by a quiet, remote beach. The first 2 days were agonizing. Without her usual distractions, her phone, her work, the constant need to be productive, the noisy thoughts in her head seemed louder and more menacing than ever before. She was bored, restless, and deeply uncomfortable. The silence of the cottage felt like a spotlight, illuminating all of her insecurities. She paced the floors. She cleaned the tiny kitchen multiple times. She did anything to avoid just sitting with herself. She almost packed her bags and left, convinced this was a foolish exercise. But she remembered her teacher's words and forced herself to stay. On the third day, exhausted from her own inner battle, she surrendered. She went down to the beach at dawn with a blanket and a flask of tea. As she sat on the sand, Watching the sun rise and the waves roll in and out in a timeless rhythm, a subtle shift began to occur. She started to notice the rhythm of the ocean. The steady, powerful sound of the waves became a kind of meditation. It was a sound so vast and constant that it began to quiet the frantic, smaller noises in her own mind. For hours, she just sat and listened to the silence between the waves. In that profound quiet, her anxious thoughts didn't vanish completely, but they lost their power. They became like distant birds flying across the vast sky of her awareness, no longer the central focus of her reality. She was not her thoughts. She was the sky in which the thoughts appeared. In that newfound inner space, something new began to emerge. It wasn't a fully formed melody. It was just a feeling, a sense of peace, a feeling of connection to the vastness of the ocean. For the first time in months, she wasn't trying to create music. She was simply experiencing the world. When she returned home at the end of the week and sat down at her piano, she didn't force anything. She just closed her eyes, remembered the sound of the ocean, and let her fingers move. And from that place of inner silence, a new, beautiful, and deeply personal melody began to flow. A melody that was not forced, but discovered. Chloe's story teaches us a crucial lesson. Clarity and creativity are not born from force, but from stillness. When our minds are cluttered with noise, we cannot access our deeper creative impulses or our own innate wisdom. We need to intentionally create periods of silence to allow the mud to settle, so the clear water of our intuition can be seen. This is the essence of mindfulness practices. Mindfulness is the art of paying attention to the present moment without judgment. It is about creating a quiet space within yourself where you can simply be, without the constant need to do. You do not need to escape to a remote beach to practice this. You can find your sanctuary of silence in the small moments of your everyday life. It can be the 5 minutes you spend sipping your morning tea, focusing only on the warmth of the cup and the taste of the tea. It could be the choice to eat your lunch without scrolling through your phone, simply paying attention to the flavors and textures of your food. It could be a sound bath, where you just sit quietly for a few minutes and notice all the sounds around you, the hum of the refrigerator, the chirping of a bird outside your window, the sound of your own breathing, without labeling them as good or bad. Let's try a very simple practice of this right now, a practice you can do anywhere, anytime. I want to invite you to just pause what you are doing, and I want you to listen. Don't listen for anything in particular. Just open your awareness to all the sounds that are present in your environment right now. Listen to the sounds that are far away, and listen to the sounds that are very close. Maybe even the sound of your own body. Let's just listen together, in silence, for about 30 seconds. What did you notice? You probably heard sounds that you normally tune out completely. This simple act of just listening brings you directly into the present moment and provides a brief respite from the constant chatter of your thoughts. It's a mini meditation. Practicing this for just a few minutes each day can have a profound effect on your mental well-being. It's like a daily cleaning for your mind, sweeping away some of the accumulated stress and mental clutter. This inner quiet is not only for creativity, it is essential for making wise decisions. When you are faced with an important choice, the worst thing you can do is make a decision from a place of panic or mental chaos. The advice of others can be helpful, but ultimately, the right path for you can only be determined by listening to your own inner voice. And that voice can only be heard in the quiet. When you give yourself the gift of silence, you allow your subconscious mind to process information. You connect with your core values, and you gain a sense of clarity that logic alone cannot provide. So, I urge you to begin to view silence not as an empty luxury, but as an essential nutrient for your mind and soul. Just as your body needs food and rest, your mind needs periods of quiet to function at its best. Become a guardian of your own inner peace. Make conscious choices to unplug from the constant stream of external stimulation. Start small, be patient with yourself, and notice how these small pockets of silence begin to bring a greater sense of calm, clarity, and purpose to your entire life. In the quiet, you will not lose yourself. You will find yourself. The principles we have discussed are timeless, but they face a unique and formidable challenge in the world we live in today. The digital age. We are the first generations in human history to carry a constant source of infinite noise and distraction in our pockets. Our smartphones, tablets, and computers have connected us in miraculous ways, but they have also created a new kind of inner turmoil. This is the challenge of digital noise. It's the constant stream of notifications, emails, messages, news alerts, and social media updates that relentlessly pull at our attention, fragmenting our focus and leaving us in a state of perpetual, low-grade anxiety. This digital noise does more than just distract us. It fundamentally changes the way our brains work. It trains us to crave constant stimulation and to become deeply uncomfortable with even a few moments of unfilled time. Think about it. What is the first thing most of us do when we are standing in a line, waiting for a friend, or sitting on a bus? We pull out our phones. We have become allergic to boredom, allergic to the quiet moments of simply being with our own thoughts. This has serious consequences. It erodes our ability to concentrate deeply. It stifles our creativity, which, as we know, is born in stillness, and it can significantly increase our stress and anxiety levels. The fear of missing out, or FOMO, drives us to stay constantly connected, to keep scrolling, to keep checking, ensuring that our minds never have a true moment of rest. In this context, choosing silence is not just a wellness practice. It is an act of rebellion. It is a conscious choice to reclaim your mind from the chaos. Let me tell you about a university student named Mark. Mark was in his final year of studying engineering, a notoriously difficult field. He was smart and hardworking, but he was struggling immensely. He felt like his brain was broken. He would sit down to study for his final exams, and within minutes, his mind would wander. He would feel an irresistible urge to check his phone. A quick look at Instagram would turn into 30 minutes of mindless scrolling. A notification from a group chat would pull him into a long conversation. He would try to read a dense textbook, but his attention span felt shattered. He could only focus for a few minutes at a time. He was constantly tired, anxious, and falling further and further behind in his studies. The digital noise had hijacked his focus. Feeling desperate, Mark read an article about the benefits of a digital detox. The idea was to completely disconnect from all screens and internet for a set period of time. It sounded extreme, almost impossible, but he decided to try it for just 48 hours over a weekend. He informed his friends and family, turned off his phone and his laptop, and put them in a drawer. The first few hours were a form of torture. He felt a phantom vibration in his pocket where his phone used to be. He felt a profound sense of anxiety, a gnawing feeling that he was missing something important. His mind screamed for the familiar comfort of a screen. But as the day wore on, something began to change. Without his phone to constantly distract him, Mark started to notice the world around him again. He went for a long walk and actually looked at the trees and the sky. He found an old, forgotten novel on his bookshelf and started to read. To his amazement, he read for an hour straight without losing focus. The next day, he sat down with his engineering textbook. It was still difficult, but for the first time in months, he was able to concentrate. He could follow complex arguments and solve problems without his mind being pulled in a million different directions. The silence he had created by removing the digital noise was like a healing balm for his fractured attention. When he finally turned his phone back on after 48 hours, the flood of notifications felt jarring and unpleasant. He realized that he had been living in a state of constant, self-inflicted mental chaos. That weekend didn't magically solve all his problems, but it was a profound wake-up call. It taught him that his focus wasn't broken. It was just buried under a mountain of digital noise. Now, a complete 48-hour digital detox might not be practical for everyone. But we can all learn from Mark's experience by building small habits of digital silence into our lives. These are not about rejecting technology, but about learning to control it so that it doesn't control us. One of the most powerful things you can do is to turn off all non-essential notifications on your phone. Do you really need your phone to buzz every time someone likes your photo? Each notification is a tiny interruption that breaks your focus and depletes your mental energy. Another powerful habit is to create no-phone zones or times in your day. This could be the dinner table, ensuring that meal times are for real human connection. It could be the first hour of the morning and the last hour before bed. Starting your day without immediately flooding your brain with emails and news can set a calmer tone for the entire day. And ending your day in silence, rather than staring at a blue screen, has been proven to dramatically improve the quality of your sleep. Here is a simple but transformative challenge for you. Tonight, just for tonight, I want you to practice a digital sunset. 30 minutes before you plan to go to sleep, I want you to put your phone and any other screens away. Put your phone in another room so you are not tempted to reach for it. Use those 30 minutes to do something quiet and analog. Read a physical book. Listen to some calm music. Do some gentle stretching. Or just sit quietly and reflect on your day. Just 30 minutes. Notice how you feel. Notice if it's difficult. And notice how it affects your sleep and your state of mind when you wake up in the morning. This small act of creating digital silence can be the first step towards reclaiming your attention and your peace of mind from the relentless demands of the digital world. Throughout our conversation, we have focused primarily on the power of using silence, but there is another side to this coin that is equally important, especially for language learners: how to react when you are on the receiving end of silence. What do you do when you are in a conversation and the other person becomes quiet? For many of us, this can be just as, if not more, uncomfortable than being silent ourselves. Our minds can quickly jump to negative conclusions. We might think, they're angry with me, they're bored, or they think what I said was stupid. If you are speaking in English, this anxiety can be even worse. You might immediately assume, they didn't understand me. My English must be terrible. This panic can cause you to start talking nervously, to over-explain yourself, or to retract what you just said, which can make the situation even more awkward. Learning to be a calm and confident interpreter of other people's silence is a vital communication skill. The first and most important step is to understand that silence has many different meanings. It is not always a negative signal or a strategic tactic. Sometimes a person is silent simply because they are thinking. You may have asked them a complex question or shared an important piece of information, and they need a moment to process it. Their silence is a sign of respect for what you have said. At other times, a person might be silent because they are feeling shy, or because they are carefully searching for the right words to express themselves, especially if they are not speaking in their native language. And sometimes, silence is a sign of a deep emotional response. They might be moved, surprised, or saddened by what you have shared, and they need a moment to connect with their own feelings before they can respond. Let me share a short story about a woman named Priya. Priya had been working on a creative project for months, pouring her heart and soul into it. She finally finished it and decided to show it to her close friend and mentor, Tom. She was incredibly nervous, as Tom's opinion meant the world to her. After she presented her work, she waited anxiously for his reaction. But Tom just looked at the project and was completely silent. 1 second passed, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. With every passing second, Priya's heart sank deeper. Her mind flooded with negative thoughts. He hates it. He thinks it's terrible. I'm a failure. I've just embarrassed myself completely. She was just about to break the silence with a flood of nervous apologies to say, I know it's not very good. I should have worked on it more. But just as she was about to speak, she remembered a piece of advice she had once read. Don't rush to fill a silence. Let it breathe. So, she took a deep breath, clenched her fists to stop herself from talking, and just waited. After what felt like an eternity, Tom finally looked up from the project, and his eyes were filled with emotion. He broke into a huge, genuine smile and said, Priya, I'm speechless. I'm just taking it all in. This is absolutely incredible. It's so much better than I ever imagined. Priya's wave of relief was overwhelming. Her negative assumptions had been completely wrong. Tom's silence was not a sign of disapproval. It was a sign of awe. If she had panicked and filled that silence with her own insecurities, she would have robbed herself of that beautiful moment of validation. This story holds a powerful lesson for all of us. When you encounter silence from another person, your first move should not be to speak, but to observe. Stay calm and patient. Pay attention to their nonverbal cues. What is their body language telling you? Do they look angry and closed off? Or do they look thoughtful and engaged? Their posture and facial expression will often tell you more than the silence itself. If you can learn to sit comfortably with someone else's silence, you give them a great gift, the freedom to respond authentically, in their own time. If a silence does feel prolonged and genuinely uncomfortable, and you feel the need to speak, avoid making assumptions. Instead of filling the silence with nervous chatter, Try asking a gentle, open-ended question. You could say something like, "I'd love to hear what you're thinking," or simply, "Take your time." These phrases are invitations, not demands. They show that you are sensitive to their need for a moment and that you are not trying to pressure them. This approach maintains a sense of connection and respect, even within the quiet. This skill is especially crucial for you as an English learner. You will undoubtedly have conversations where a native speaker becomes quiet after you say something. It is so easy to immediately assume that their silence is a negative judgment on your English skills. But in most cases, that is simply not true. They are likely just processing what you said, enjoying the conversation, and formulating their own thoughtful reply. If you can learn to interpret these moments not as a rejection of your English, but as a normal part of natural conversation, you will feel so much more relaxed and confident. You will stop seeing conversations as a test that you are constantly failing, and start seeing them as a dance, where moments of silence are just as important as the moments of speech. And now, we arrive at the heart of our journey together on this channel, connecting the immense power of silence to your own progress in learning and speaking English. This may be the most transformative shift in perspective you can make as a language learner. Many of us carry a deep-seated belief that to be a fluent English speaker is to be a fast English speaker. We admire people who can speak quickly, without any apparent effort or hesitation. Consequently, we see our own pauses, our moments of searching for a word, as evidence of our failure. We feel that every and is a public announcement that our English is not good enough. This fear of pausing creates a vicious cycle of anxiety. Because we are afraid to be silent, we try to rush our words. We speak faster than our brains can comfortably process the language, which leads to more grammatical mistakes and incorrect word choices. This, in turn, makes us even more anxious and less confident, which makes us rush even more. It's an exhausting and counterproductive way to communicate. The truth that advanced speakers and skilled communicators know is this: a well-placed pause is not a flaw. It is a feature. It is a sign of confidence, intelligence, and control. It is a tool that you can and should use to become a more powerful and effective English speaker. Let's break down why this is so important. Firstly, a pause is a vital thinking tool. English is not your first language. It is completely natural and normal that you will need a moment to formulate your thoughts, to find the right vocabulary, and to structure your sentences correctly. When you deny yourself this thinking time, you are setting yourself up for failure. By embracing the pause, by giving yourself 2 or 3 seconds of silence before you speak, or in the middle of a complex sentence, you are giving your brain the crucial time it needs to perform at its best. This will result in speech that is more accurate, more coherent, and ultimately more fluent. Imagine an English learner, let's call him Ben, who is participating in a group discussion at work. His boss asks him for his opinion on a new project proposal. Ben, feeling nervous and wanting to sound fluent, starts speaking immediately. He says something like, "Yes, I think it's, very potential. It has a good idea for the market. So, we should do it." His message is weak and difficult to understand, not because his English is terrible, but because he didn't give himself a moment to think. Now, Let's imagine Ben has learned to embrace the pause. When his boss asks for his opinion, he takes a slow, confident breath. He looks his boss in the eye, nods, and allows for a few seconds of silence. In that time, he organizes his main idea. Then he speaks, clearly and calmly. He says, "Thank you for asking. Overall, pause. I believe the proposal is strong, especially its focus on customer research." Pause. My only concern would be the timeline, which seems a bit ambitious. The difference is night and day. The pauses didn't make him sound less fluent. They made him sound more thoughtful, more structured, and infinitely more professional. His silence gave his words weight. Secondly, pauses are essential for the listener. When you speak without any breaks, in a long, continuous stream of words, it can be very difficult for your listener to follow and process what you are saying. Pauses act like punctuation in spoken language. They break your ideas down into digestible chunks. They signal to the listener that you are moving from one point to another. They give your listener a moment to absorb your message and understand its meaning. Speaking with thoughtful pauses is actually an act of kindness to the person you are talking to. It makes you a clearer and more effective communicator. So, how can we start to practice this and become more comfortable with pausing? We can adapt the shadowing technique we've discussed before. The goal is not just to mimic the sounds, but to mimic the rhythm and the silence. Let's practice this together now. I will say a sentence with intentional pauses. I want you to listen carefully, and then repeat it out loud, trying to match my pacing and my silences exactly. Are you ready? The key to confidence, pause, is not to eliminate fear. Pause, but to learn to act in spite of it. Now it's your turn. Say it out loud. Feel those pauses. Feel how they add emphasis and give you a moment to breathe. Wonderful. Let's try another one with a slightly different emotional tone, a more inquisitive one. What if our greatest strengths, pause, are hidden in the things we are most afraid of? Go ahead and repeat that, feeling the curiosity in the pause. Excellent. And one more. This time, a gentler, more reassuring sentence. It's okay to not have all the answers. Pause. Sometimes, the question is more important. Practice that one. Feeling the kindness in the silence. By practicing sentences like this with different emotional textures, you are retraining your brain. You are building a new mental habit that associates pausing with confidence and clarity, rather than with failure and fear. Finally, let's not forget that half of being a great communicator is being a great listener, and you simply cannot listen deeply if your mind is chattering away, rehearsing what you are going to say next. When you are in a conversation in English, your silence is a golden opportunity for learning. When you quiet your own mind and truly listen to the native speakers or advanced learners around you, you absorb so much. You notice their intonation, their use of idioms, their sentence structures, and the natural rhythm of the language. This deep listening is a form of active study. Your silence allows you to be a sponge, soaking up the language in its natural context. So, your English practice challenge for the week is this. I want you to consciously practice the art of the pause. In your next English conversation, whether it's with a tutor, a language partner, or a colleague, I want you to deliberately insert short 2 to 3 second pauses before you answer questions. Own the silence. Use it as your thinking time. Secondly, When the other person is speaking, I want you to practice silent listening. Quiet your mind and just focus on their words. Resist the temptation to formulate your response until after they have completely finished. If you commit to these two practices, I can guarantee you will start to see a significant shift. You will feel more in control, your speaking will become clearer, and your anxiety will decrease. You will realize that true fluency is not about the speed of your words, but about the clarity of your thoughts. And clarity is born in the quiet. As we bring our exploration to a gentle close, let's take one final quiet moment to reflect on the path we have traveled together. We started our conversation by questioning our culture's deep-seated fear of silence, our relentless need to fill every empty space with noise. From there, we journeyed through the various landscapes of our lives, discovering that this misunderstood tool holds a quiet power that can fundamentally change our reality. We saw in the story of Isabel and Daniel how a moment of silence in a difficult conversation can build a bridge of trust where a flood of words had built a wall. We learned with Samir in his negotiation with Ms. Chen that the person more comfortable with silence often holds the advantage, allowing them to be more persuasive without being more aggressive. We then turned our gaze inward, following the musician Chloe to the sea, and realizing that inner silence is the fertile ground from which clarity, creativity, and our own deepest truths can finally emerge. We navigated the specific challenges of the digital age, learning with Mark that reclaiming our focus requires a conscious rebellion against constant noise. We learned to interpret the silence of others not as a rejection, but as a space for thought and emotion. And most importantly, for our shared purpose here, we brought this principle into the very heart of your English learning journey. We challenged the myth that fluency equals speed, and reframed the pause not as a sign of weakness, but as an indispensable tool for thoughtful, accurate, and confident communication. The overarching theme, the simple truth that weaves all these stories together, is this: silence is not empty. It is a space filled with possibility. It is the space required for listening, for thinking, for healing, and for growing. I hope that our time together today has planted a seed in your mind, a seed of curiosity about the power of quiet. The world will not suddenly become less noisy. The pressures to speak, to react, and to be constantly on will likely remain. But you are not powerless. You can choose to cultivate your own small sanctuaries of silence. You can choose to see a pause in conversation not as a failure, but as a moment of strength. You can choose to give yourself 5 minutes of quiet each day to simply breathe and be present. These are not small acts. They are revolutionary acts of self-care and wisdom in a world that is starving for stillness. I want to leave you with a final analogy. Think of a master painter creating a masterpiece on a large canvas. They do not cover every single inch of the canvas with paint. The empty space, the negative space, is just as important as the painted objects. It is this empty space that gives the objects their shape, their definition, and their power. It allows the viewer's eye to rest and to appreciate the beauty of what is there. Without the empty space, the canvas would just be a chaotic mess of color. Your conversations and your life are like that canvas. Your words are the paint, but your silence is the essential empty space that gives your words meaning, shape, and impact. Learn to be a master artist of your own communication. Learn to value the silence as much as you value the words. So, my gentle call to action for you this week is to become the artist of your life's canvas. Practice the art of the pause. Choose one area of your life where you want to be more intentional. Perhaps it's in your meetings at work, in your conversations with your family, or in your English practice. And in that area, commit to using silence as your tool. Don't overthink it. Just start. Take that extra breath before you speak. Listen for 2 more seconds than you normally would. Go for that walk without your headphones. I would be so grateful to hear how it goes. Please come back to this video and share your experience in the comments below. What did you notice? How did it feel? What changed? Your story will become a part of our collective learning and will inspire others in this amazing community to try it for themselves. If this conversation has been meaningful for you, I would be honored if you would subscribe to English in Fluency. Let's continue to explore these important ideas together, improving not just our language skills, but our life skills side by side. And if there is someone in your life who you feel could benefit from a little more quiet and a little less noise, please share this episode with them. Thank you for the gift of your time and your quiet attention today. Remember, the journey to fluency and to a more peaceful life is not always about adding more. Sometimes it's about taking things away. It's about creating space. It's about learning to listen to the profound wisdom that can only be found in the silence. I'm Alex. Until next time, take wonderful care of yourself.